Thank you for watching Jamie TV. What you just heard was my new and unfinished track. I was in bed last night watching this TV programme about alien abduction with the missus, and I'm chatting away to her and I suddenly realised she's not responding anymore. And I'm not sure whether it was myself or the TV programme that bored her to sleep, bless her. But I thought, never mind, I got my iPad from the side of the bed, I put my cheap crappy little earbuds in, and straight away I'm into this world of music that I have inside my iPad. I've got a fantastic recording studio worth of amazing apps in there, and so I just start knocking around a few ideas and I came up with what you just heard. So this is the wonderful thing about mobile music production, you know, I'm in bed but I'm creating music, and now I'm in my studio, so I've plugged my iPad into my iTrack dock and I'm going to see what I can do to further the track. So now I'm in here, I can get guitars out, you know, I can use the big keyboard and stuff. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the camera on, record what I do, and along the way I'll show you some of the apps I'm using and how they work. And maybe, you know, it might be useful to one or two people out there. There's going to be just a few minutes of mostly chat for the beginning of this video while I just get it set up, while we get into this, as Dean would say. But please stick with it, there's going to be loads of music later on, plenty of playing coming, and I promise I am going to be slapping the bass. So before we get proper stuck into this track, let me show you what I have so far. Digikeys really is the heart of this track up to this point. I'm using it to send MIDI information out on channel 1, 4 and 5 to drums, piano and brass. Now, as you can see in Digikeys, I could actually be sending out 16 different tracks worth of MIDI information, and I can either use the internal sounds or I can send out to third-party apps. I can also build patterns in here and assemble them into a song chain, and that song chain will play in sync with AUM when I press play up here because I have host sync activated. I'm using Digisticks for drums. Digisticks actually has 4 output buses, so what I've done is I've put the kick onto the second bus, snare onto the third, hats onto the fourth, and the rest are coming out of output bus 1, but I can still mix those drums, pan them, add reverb, stuff like that, because Digisticks has its own internal mixer. And I'll just show you quickly how you select the output buses. If I click on the bass drum there, you'll see that's going to output bus 2 and the snare bus 3, etc, etc. Okay, and I'm using Neo Soul keys for electric piano. I mean, what can I say about this app? It's just a wonderful sounding app. If you're interested in what sound I'm using, there we go. Of course, these are all apps that I'm very familiar with, that I use quite frequently, but BeatHawk is brand new to me. I just kind of opened it for the first time a couple of days ago and I thought, well, you know, it's a drum thing, what do I need another drum thing for? But then I discovered I could do this with it. So hopefully as I go along making this video and recording this track, I will discover new things about this app and I'll share them with you. So when I open up BeatHawk for the first time, I see 16 pads with drum samples loaded into them, and they all sound great. The app's set out fantastic, it's all very clear. I find the song arranger, it's very intuitive, it's very easy to set up a full song structure, and it's magic. But like I said, I already have apps that I use for drums, and I particularly like Digisticks for the multi-output bus. And if I want a different kind of drum sound, I have Roosemaker, which has 8 output buses, and I love that. So I was thinking, I like the way that BeatHawk is set out. I wonder if I can use it for something else. So I'm looking through the browser, and there's all these in-app purchases, and I spot brass riffs. Now for ages I've been looking for some brass sounds that would work in like a rock, pop, funk, soul kind of a context. I mean, I've got great orchestral brass stuff on my iPad, I've got great synth brass stuff, but I've been looking for some time for these kinds of sounds. So I was made up when I heard them, and I got the app for free, so I don't mind making a £5 purchase to get great brass sounds on my iPad. Now, if you look at BeatHawk, the usual view of BeatHawk when you first open it up, you'd see these 16 pads with drum samples loaded into them. But if you load up from your browser one of these kinds of thingamabobs with a little keyboard thingy there, what you get is a full range of sounds. You see that there? If I click this, now I've got effectively a keyboard. Now, if I had drum samples loaded into here, I'd be on this page, and the MIDI information coming from, well, this one's coming in on channel 5, and that would trigger all these drum samples. But if I click this, now it's going to trigger the brass sounds. Alright, now let's talk about workflow. Recently, Jakob Hack made a video for his Hacktack channel that was quite fascinating, all about his workflow, which it seems boils down into two areas. Sometimes he thinks of music in a more linear kind of fashion, and he wants to construct it within a traditional DAW, and sometimes he wants to kind of experiment and live jam and use AUM to maybe, discover some new ideas. And it struck me that although we're very different kinds of musicians, really, my approach is pretty much that exact same thing. But since I watched the video, it's made me reevaluate the way I work, and I've kind of stepped back from it and tried to look at it from a different point of view. As a result of that, the way I want to take this piece now is I'm working in AUM, and it's becoming a piece of music. And rather than shifting it from here into a digital audio workstation, using multi-track and Digikeys, I want to see if I can develop this piece and actually complete it in AUM, or let's see how near to that I can get. Now, if we're going to do that, what we have to consider is resources, because my iPad is only a 2017 5th gen, so it's not one of the newer, bigger, more powerful models. Now, what we have to think about is the AUV3s, because the AUV3s consume a lot more processing power than real audio does. So the way I'm going to work is I've got electric piano, I've got drums, I've got the brass in BeatHawk. So I'm going to see if I can kind of complete a full song structure using those instruments. Because if I've completed a full song structure using those instruments before I start to bring other things in, then if we start to run out of resources, I can kind of convert those to WAVs, bring them into multi-track, save on resources, and then start adding new instruments. So let's see what I can come up with. Now I'm going to do what I've been itching to do ever since I first started working on this track. I'm going to record some bass guitar, and I'm going to record it into multi-track. And seeing as how multi-track has multi-output buses, I'm going to record the bass guitar in clean, and then I can add whatever amp emulation, compression effects, etc. that I want on the way out. That way I can manipulate it to best suit the track, rather than recording it at the front end and that sound then being fixed. So let's go here, add a channel for the bass, which is coming into the iTrack dock on the left hand side. So hardware input, iTrack dock left, and we add multi-track as an effect. That's how we get the sound into multi-track, which is there. Into multi-track now, stretch it out a little bit, activate host sync so that it runs in time with everything else, and arm it. And now we're ready to record some funky bass guitar on multi-track, track 1. To be a Fret King endorsee now for many years, but for several years I pestered them to make a bass guitar in purple. I never thought they'd actually do it, but I thought, you know, if you don't pester, you don't get. And then one day, one of the directors sent me a colour swatch and said, is this the kind of colour that you're talking about? And I said, yeah, that's it. A man purple, not like a girly purple, but a man purple. And then it went quiet again. And after a few weeks, they got in touch again and asked me if I could drive up to JHS in Leeds, which is only an hour for me, and check out a bass. So I drove up and they got this waiting for me. And they wanted me to check it out and see how closely it played to my other 4-string Perception bass, because this had been made in a different factory. Essentially, it's a prototype. And although it had been made in a totally different factory, it was pretty much identical, apart from the fact that it has 2 single coil pickups instead of having a split coil here, and it is in fact a man purple. Now, they did put this colour into production on some of the other instruments, but not on this model. So the nice thing about this for me is that it remains unique, and I call it the Purple Assassin. Whilst progressing working on this track, something was bugging me. I knew that I could get a lot more out of Beathawk than I was, but the problem stemmed from the fact that I was using Digikeys to send MIDI information into Beathawk to play back the brass. Not that there's anything wrong with Digikeys at all, far from it, but Beathawk will only receive MIDI on one channel. So if I just open it up and you look at this page of it, you can either use the MIDI information coming in to play back these 16 pads, or you can switch it over here and play back a melody on a full instrument. Now, it occurred to me that if I went to Digikeys, had a look at that information, that MIDI information I've programmed in for the brass, copied it into these patterns here in Beathawk, and then went into the song arranger and arranged the full song here so that when I press play in AUM, it would play back Beathawk's song arranger in time with everything else. I could then go into my browser, select some more sounds that might be appropriate to this track, load them into these pads, and then use the patterns to play back numerous instruments at the same time, because of course BeatHawk could play back 16 different sounds at the same time. On these pads you can either have a sample, a one shot, a loop, or a full instrument. So then what I've done is, once I've sorted all that out, I've used a few bits and pieces to just fill out this track. I've used this percussion loop here, shaker and tambourine, and a variation on that here, a clap here which has far too much reverb on it at the moment, but I'm using, from Digikeys, I'm using a very modern, very crisp, quite digital sounding clap that I think is pretty effective, but I thought it might sound cool mixed with a sample of a real human clap as well. And I've also got a couple of funny little samples. Not that one. No, I didn't use that one, did I? I used this. And one other thing. I thought that might sound cool, but now I just think it sounds really game show. That one too. Anyway, so I hope I've explained that okay, because I found that very, very difficult to put into words. What this track needs now is some 6-string dirty clean Strat style twanging, which we're going to record into multitrack. So let's just go into multitrack now, and what we have to do is simply go to track 2 and arm that one instead of track 1. We'll go here and let's just label this guitar, because it's very important to label things. Right, now that's multitrack set up, ready to record guitar. It's as straightforward as that. But like, I recorded the bass in clean, intending to get a bass sound later by using an output bus. With the guitar, whilst I'm playing this part, I want to be able to hear that amplifier sound. It just helps get a feel. When you want that slightly dirty kind of a sound, it just helps to get that feel while you're playing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to here and I'm going to open up Numbrini's awesome new guitar amp, which I've just gone past. Where are we? Soundmaster. Now it's added here in the chain after multitrack, so that when I record, I'm going to record the guitar into multitrack clean, and we're hearing the effect after, so that I will at a later point be able to change the sounds in the Soundmaster and adjust them to perfectly suit the track. Recording that guitar part, I could hear a few things starting to play slightly out of time, and there was a little bit of glitching going on. So clearly now we're starting to push the CPU a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start turning some of those AUV3 instruments into real audio and pull that real audio into multitrack, and let's see how we progress from there. That may of course be a little bit boring to watch, so montage. If you take a look at my project with me now, you'll see that things are looking far simpler. This is my master out channel, and this is the channel for the microphone I'm speaking to you on. Other than that, all I've got is 3 instances of multitrack. So that means that everything is now real audio, and I have a very rough mix. You're going to hear it in a moment, so please forgive the roughness of it. But I just want to press play so that I can show you that everything is running in sync, and I want you to just check out here and see what happens with the CPU, bearing in mind of course that I am screen recording at the same time as playing this back to you. Okay, so there's no need to play back the whole song to you at this moment. That's just to simply demonstrate that with, what have I got? I've got 21, that's not 21, I've got 21 tracks of real audio playing back, and the CPU is looking good. Although I have to say, it does occasionally spike, but that's mostly while I'm screen recording, and I haven't heard it as yet go out of time, which is a good thing, because although I've already done the processing for the EQs and compressions and reverbs for every instrument, almost every instrument, I have still got the guitar sounds and bass sounds to do. So I'm going to need to use multi-tracks, multi-out facility to do that. So I'm going to do that now. Let's see how that goes, and let's see what happens with the CPU. Alright, so what you're hearing there is a bass sound that I've created for this track using Mammoth. Let me just stop the track a moment. Now, just to bring you up to speed on where we are now, I've been into the first instance of multi-track, and I've actually condensed the parts that I recorded for guitar. I'm now only using 4 tracks in that instance of multi-track. I got rid of some bits that were just a bit flowery and unnecessary. So I've got 4 output buses from multi-track here, bus 1, 2, 3 and 4 for tracks 1 to 4 respectively, and on track 1 I've got the bass going out, so I've added Mammoth here and I've created a bass sound alike. Now what's happening is intermittently, every now and again I'm getting a real big spike even when I'm not screen recording. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a sound for each of these tracks, export it as real audio, and then bring it back into multi-track so that everything is completely processed when I come to mixing. Because what I'm hoping is that I'm going to be able to use the multi-output bus facility in every instance of multi-track. So rather than mixing in each individual multi-track, AUM will just become one big mixing desk. I should have said just now, Mammoth is a truly wonderful app. I'm only not going into depth about it because this video is about something else and I've already done that. I'll put a link to that particular video up here. But Mammoth really is the only truly professional solution for a bass guitar player on the iOS platform. And similarly, the Nimbrini apps are, in my opinion, the most professional solution for a guitar player on the iOS platform. And although again I've already done videos about Nimbrini apps, and I'm going like this because I'm going to put a link up here if I remember, But there's a new one, Soundmaster, so I just want to take a little moment to say that Soundmaster is quite obviously based on the Tone Master, and having used one of those particular Fender amps myself numerous times, I can say that this amp sim, is a ridiculously close emulation. It's amazing to me. I mean, I've wanted for a long time to get an amp sim where I could get that truly kind of that front end of amp sound, like where you can back off your volume a little, back off your playing a little bit, and the whole thing cleans up, and then you've only got to dig in and it breaks up, and it's got that truly Fender breakup kind of tone to it. And I always say to people, when you're using amp sims, don't kind of look at the amp face and move the controls as you would on the actual amp. You know, it's a whole different ball game, right? This is not a real world thing. This is a digital realm thing. Have the sound in your head that you want, then move the controls and find that sound. Don't do it with your eyes, do it with your ears. And yet, on this amp, it's kind of made a liar out of me. It just behaves just like the actual amp. It's quite remarkable. But I'm not going to go in any more depth than that, because I'm going to do a separate video about it. Alright, I know my mix sucks. I've not done that bit yet. But what you're hearing there is 20 tracks of real audio running, I think, perfectly in sync. So I've finished with the amp sims and closed them down. And so what I want to know now, because normally at this point, what I'd probably do is I'd say, well, I've finished with all the good stuff now, right? I've finished the playing, I've shown you some apps, and now I'm gonna put the camera off and mix the track, and I'll share it after this video. Because usually that seems like the right place to end one of these videos, because I don't want to bore people too much. But what I really want to know now is, can I use the multi-out buses from each instance of multitrack to turn AUM into one big mixing desk, because all the other processing is done? Can I do that? I don't know. But what I'm gonna, and if you don't know what I'm on about, by the way, I've done a video about multitracks, multi-output buses, so I'll put a link to that up here. So what I'm going to do to find this out is I'm just going to open an output bus for every track that I'm using in the 3 instances of multitrack, and then I'm just going to press play and let's see what happens. Okay, it's cross fingers time. I've now got an output bus, a separate output bus for every instrument. Every fader is at 0. In each instance of multitrack, every fader is at 0. All the pans are in the center, so it's not mixed. I've no idea what it's going to sound like. We just want to know whether it's going to screw up or not. So keep your eye on the digital signal processing here, or CPU, and bear in mind that I am screen recording as well. Don't judge me on the mix. I'm pressing play. Okay, that all seems to be running in time, so I'm going to get stuck into the mix and I shall be back with some thoughts. I think it would be appropriate to round this video off with a final thoughts section, much like Vortex would over at Mobile Music Pro. It seems like a grown-up and tidy way to do things, and I made notes because I'm very, very old and I don't want to forget anything important, and I'm going to try and do this quickly because it's boiling in here, because the studio is soundproofed and it's red hot outside and I'm starving too. So I have just used AUM as a digital audio workstation. It's not originally intended for that, but I think I've proved that certainly up to a point you can use it for that quite successfully. I had 20 tracks of real audio, 3 instances of multi-track, I had 20 output buses, and mixing the track, I got the occasional little spike in the DSP or CPU, whatever you want to call it. Nothing that caused me any great problem. Well, nothing that really caused me a problem, if I'm honest. And every now and again, I've got to be honest about this, every now and again, when I press play, things would run out of sync. And all I had to do was stop the track, take it back to ground zero, press play again, and it would all run in time again. So I don't know what that's about, but what we've got to remember is we are running 3 mini digital audio workstations and all of the potential output buses within AUM, which is not really intended for the purpose. And my iPad is a few years old. It's a 2017 5th gen. And one thing about that actually is that I think it works well me making these videos with an older iPad like that, because I'm trying to show people what you can achieve with an iPad. Now, most people watching the videos probably have a better iPad than me, so they're going to think, well, if he can do that with that old thing, then, you know, I can do something at least as good or better with my iPad. And it also means that for people with older iPads, I am seeing the problems that they might encounter. If I was making these videos with like a real up-to-date iPad, I wouldn't spot that. And I suppose ideally I ought to have both. That would be ideal. In fact, it'd be ideal for this video, because all along I've been thinking, this is pretty good, this is working pretty well. What could I achieve if I did have, you know, a bigger, better, newer iPad? But I'm a professional musician and I'm in lockdown, and so I'm hardly earning anything, so I am not getting an iPad Pro anytime soon. So what would be really, really cool is if anyone out there does have a much better iPad than me, who would care to run a similar experiment and share your results in the comments of this video, or make your own video about it, give me a link, get in touch about it. I spend a lot of time on Facebook in the groups where we discuss iOS music, particularly iPad Musician. So just, you know, get in touch, do the experiment, let me know what your findings are. I would love to know. Things that we ought to talk about. How could it be better using AUM as a substitute digital audio workstation? Well, if it had a transport bar, for one thing. It's got a transport bar, but it's sort of tiny, and you stick your finger on it and you drag it along and you wait and you watch the counter, and then suddenly the counter goes really fast and you miss where you're going to. If it had a bigger, better, more comprehensive transport bar, that would be really, really helpful for this particular function. Other than that, I can't really criticize AUM. And actually, it is an app that I use loads. It's in most of my videos. I use it absolutely tons. I probably use it every day. And I never talk about it because it's the mixing desk, isn't it? It's the virtual mixing desk. It doesn't make an exciting synth noise. It doesn't, you know, it's not a voice changer. It's not, it's just it's a mixing desk. And yet, it's one of the very most important apps that has been developed for iOS. So, yeah, I really should give myself a slap round the head for that. I could better transport bar. I suppose the other thing I could mention is that multi-track is amazing for what it is. It's very cheap. It's tiny. There's a ton of capability crammed into it. I wonder whether maybe multi-track could become even bigger and better with enough support. If you don't have it and you use AUM regularly and you record real audio, go buy it. Go get it. 4Pockets are one of the most important and best developers making stuff for iOS right now. Now, is it as good as working in Cubasis? Now, or any other DAW? This is a good question. Is it as good as working in Cubasis 2? Honestly, no. No, it's not. And I have Cubasis 2, and I've used it for hundreds of things. So why aren't I just doing this in Cubasis 2? It would have been easy to do. Well, my thinking on that is Cubasis 2 is the old app. And whilst it still works brilliantly, because I'm still using it, it's old. And I'm making videos about iOS music, and I feel like I should be using the current app, not the old one, which probably won't be supported for that much longer, really. And you know, if I make a video about Cubasis, I should be using Cubasis 3 because that's the new thing. But I refuse to open Cubasis 3. I've fallen out with it because it is so unstable and unpredictable on my iPad. I know people with newer, better iPads have said they've had a lot less issues than me. But still, I mean, it's been out for nearly 7 months. They gave us no money towards it if we already owned Cubasis 2, and gave us a long list of reasons why. But it's not as good as Cubasis 2. Cubasis 2 is stable, and at the end of the day, you can have all the extra new features you want, but if it crashes every 2 minutes like it does for me, that's just, it's of no use to me. I'm on another topic now. Let's come back to AUM as a digital audio workstation. Would it have been easier in Cubasis 2? Yes, it would. But I think I've just successfully given you my reasons why it's important to explore another area. Cubasis 3 is a disaster area, and no, it wouldn't have been easier in Cubasis 3. It wouldn't have been easier in Audio Pro because that's very unstable and unpredictable and does some very strange things and crashes very frequently. And I would love for the app to be just work. But for me, on this iPad, it really doesn't. And there are other digital audio workstations we could talk about, but none of them are really sort of tip-top for recording a lot of real audio stuff. There are workarounds and solutions, but that's what I'm looking at in AUM. And I've got to say that with the exception of Cubasis 2, I think this is the smoothest time I've had recording a full production on this iPad. I've spoken about that, I've said that, and there's something I forgot to write down, I'm sure. Oh yeah, right, okay, so the track is mixed. I need to master it. I have 2 options for mastering, and I'm not looking forward to either because I have for mastering, which I'm not going to bore you with the mastering process, but just my thoughts upon it. I have the new mastering suite in Cubasis 3, and I refuse to even look at Cubasis 3 at the moment. Or I have Final Touch by Positive Grid. Now, Final Touch I used to love because it worked great. It was fantastic, but it's in need of a few updates. It started to get a little bit glitchy. It crashes now and then. And typical Positive Grid, you know, bring out a brand new brilliant app and advertise the crap out of it, sell it to loads of people, and then eventually just stop updating it and just leave it. And what they'll probably do is they'll probably replace it with an all new version and give you nothing towards it for having bought the first version, and advertise the crap out of that and try and sell it to everybody. So I don't know what I'm going to do about mastering right now, but that's not your problem. I shall think on that later. So I'm going to mix the track, and I will post it as a follow-on to this video so you can hear the thing in full and how it turned out. You're very welcome to comment on that and give me your thoughts on what you think to the mix. The other thing, right, yes, the other thing I meant to touch on was, right, okay, so when you are mixing in iOS, depending how many tracks you're trying to do, how many plugins you've got, how old your iPad is, etc., etc., all those factors, there are compromises that need to be made. And I can't help feeling like my mix might have turned out a little bit better if I didn't have to export WAVs quite so soon. You know, if I could leave something as MIDI in an AUV3 till closer to the end of the project, and if I didn't have to export, you know, the snare drum early on in the process with the reverb already on it to save on processing later, I would like to do my EQ and reverb process at the end of mixing. That's how I always used to work. I'd like to be able to do that again. And you know what? I used to do that in Cubasis too. I've made many tracks where I've ended up with over 40 tracks of real audio, and I've then started going through each track and EQing and adding effects, and it never crashed. I hardly had any glitches, hardly had any problems at all. Yes. So anyway, that's I'm going back to Cubasis 3 and 2 and Steinberg and all that stuff. So I'm going to leave it there. I hope that this video was helpful. I hope that I've proved a point. And if you did enjoy it and it has been useful to you, please do give me the old thumb up and ding my bell. If you're not already a subscriber, there's lots of content like this from me. So please do subscribe. Feel free to add me, follow me, love me on any social media at all. All my links are down below. My email address is there for a reason. Feel free to contact me about anything to do with mobile music production or music in general. I'm here to help. This is what I do now. I'd love to know your thoughts on this video, so please do comment, keep in touch, stay safe, behave yourself, and I'll see you soon.